Hello and welcome to KOIN Conversations. I am Brenna Green, and today we're talking all things Oregon State football with Oregonian, Oregon State beat writer Ryan Clarke. Ryan, how you doing?
Doing great, Brenna. Thanks for having me. This will be fun.
I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. Just generally, you've been at almost all the practices down at Oregon State, if not all of them. So, just what kind of is the vibe around that football team right now?
Yeah, I mean, focused is obviously the big one, right? They aren't worried about the sort of outside distractions that were floating around the program last year. You know, they have the future in place with the Pac-12 on its way in 2026, the final year of the Pac-2. So that they've got a pair of games against Washington State this year, which I think is an odd but interesting part of what is in general, a pretty favorable looking schedule. And because of that, and because of the guys that they got back and the guys they brought in the transfer portal, I think that there's a sense of optimism around Oregon State that we haven't really seen around the football program in a couple of years with all the upheaval in college sports.
The big player that everyone is talking about at Oregon State right now is Malik Murphy, their quarterback transfer from Duke. What have you seen from him so far in camp?
He's so far lived up to that billing. I mean, he's a guy that, if you look back, he's a former five-star recruit. He signed with Texas, was a backup to Quinn Ewers, transferred to Duke for his first year as a starter, and had a really strong year overall. He turned the ball over a little bit. 12 interceptions is something that, he would even admit that he has looked at really in depth in the film room to see where he can improve. And you see flashes certainly of those chance taking sort of tendencies that come with a big arm quarterback like that. Big, strong guy, 6'5", stands in the pocket with confidence. He's not necessarily a dual threat guy. He's not really a guy that's going to go out and run the ball nearly as much as maybe some other quarterbacks, but he has that escapability, that mobility within the pocket, and you see it in camp going against a Beavers front seven that looks visibly improved and has given him some trouble at times. Obviously, he's still learning the offense. He's still adjusting to the program. But he spent the offseason throwing with his receivers so much that coaches essentially had to pull him back. They had to tell him and they had to tell the receivers, look, you guys can, throw all you want, but these running reps, these reps that can put strain on these wide receivers' hamstrings, maybe slow down on that a little bit. But I think that's a good problem to have with your new quarterback if he's building too much chemistry with his new wide receivers. And just from a character perspective, having spoken to him, having gotten to know him and heard about what coaches think about him so far, this is a guy that absolutely fans have an opportunity to be proud of leading their program and being an ambassador for them over the next year or two, depending on how long he stays in school and how much success he has on the field.
Yeah, he seems like a really grounded kid. One of the other things that I thought was really interesting is after the spring scrimmage, Trent Bray said that you can expect Jabari Johnson, their second string quarterback, to be playing in some capacity this year. Does that still track for you?
I think it could definitely happen, especially in some of the games against lesser opponents. You think about the schedule. A home game against FCS Sam Houston State looks like a good opportunity to rotate Jabari in a lot more than you might normally do. But even in competitive games, even in games on or above Oregon State's caliber against those opponents, Jabari Johnson is an elite athlete. He's a guy that you've seen it throughout fall camp. He can move around and he can run with some of the best of them at the quarterback position in the country. He also has improved a great deal, coaches say, over last year as a passer and as somebody that can zip the ball downfield. He's made some really impressive throws so far in camp that, if you didn't know that Malik Murphy, with all the hype and the money spent and the performance and the ability he brings, if you didn't know he was pretty much the guaranteed starter, you'd look at that guy as somebody that's competing for the job. So utilizing him even with Murphy at the same time is something they brought up, which is kind of a crazy concept in and of itself. But I think he definitely sees the field several times this season.
Perhaps some trick plays incoming. All right, let's shift to the man behind Malik Murphy. That would be Anthony Hankerson, the most definitely going to be the starting running back for this team. It really feels like to me he's really evolved both on and off the field in the last year. His personality has just come out more and more and more. What have you seen from him in practice?
Yeah, he's obviously gonna carry this team on his shoulders. He won't have to do nearly as much as he did last year by way of being somebody that they rely on that heavily, that they rely so heavily on the run game that
Mm-hmm.
it's either he succeeds and they win, or they shut the run down and Oregon State is fighting uphill. Having more balance in the offense, he said it even on the first day of fall camp, is going to open things up for everybody. I think especially him. We've seen him work a little bit more as a pass catcher, obviously, than he did last year, and then this fall working with Malik Murphy. But the offensive line and how it's getting healthier and been retooled and working under Mike Cavanaugh, who's a real tough guy, old school ball coach type of
Yes, he
personality.
is.
He is a pure character. Um, they have run blocked extremely well in the fall so far, and for a team that is definitely going to have more balance, it's certainly going to still be run first. And on the basis of that run blocking, which I think has been excellent, he'd be the first one, Hankerson would, to tell you that, quality offensive line play is the number one thing that leads to success for running back. Obviously, he has the talent, the speed, the strength. Despite being a shorter guy, he can bounce off of people. He's going to lead the way, and he's going to have help too from Saladin Allah and others like Marquise Crosby, who transferred in from Louisiana Tech, and Corday Glass, the true freshman, is somebody that's had a really strong fall camp as well. So rotating in different running backs, giving Hank a breather so he doesn't have to really be the true bell cow, is, I think, going to lead to an improvement for him. And he even said it at the start of camp. He feels like he left meat on the bone last year, and that's a motivated thing for a running back to say, and that's a guy that's hungry, no doubt, for lack of a better term.
I loved that bite from him. Now let's transition to the wide receiver room. A really interesting crop of guys because last year they were completely inexperienced, and now all of a sudden they seem to be the most experienced position group on the offense. Who's standing out to you there?
Yeah, so far, obviously Trent Walker leading the way. He's a guy that has built a lot of chemistry with Malik Murphy in the fall. There was a practice where they had, I think, six consecutive connections with each other, all completions, and that type of thing is important for Murphy to have a go-to guy who's a good route runner who can sit in space and despite his size, is a pretty physical guy. Um, Obviously, one of the big things that we will talk about that's sort of hanging over the wide receiver room is Darius Clemens' injury. He got hurt in camp, and we obviously couldn't report on it in the moment. But we've seen him now with a boot on his left foot and on crutches and using a scooter to get around. We don't know the severity yet, but you lose a big physical receiver in that situation, a guy that you can rely on in the red zone, and who is a good route runner in his own right. Um, just can't catch a break with injury for that guy. Hopefully, for the Beavers' sake, it's a shorter one. Somebody that I've been really impressed with at the receiver position so far has been Eddie Freoff, redshirt freshman out of Prineville. Somebody who didn't come into college with a lot of hype or a lot of attention. He was recruited under the previous administration, as it were, but they honored his scholarship, and he hasn't played football very long. He was adopted by his parents from Uganda, and has lived in Prineville since he was a kid, and really only started playing football when he was in high school. But just a tremendous athlete, big, strong guy. You hear people talk about him like, "Hey, that guy looks like a Big Ten receiver." And having been around a Big Ten team in Oregon last year and plenty other Big Ten teams that they played, this guy certainly fits the physical bill, and he's really starting to figure out the football stuff.
What a story for him. That is so, so cool. Prineville, of all places. So you mentioned Darius. Just losing him, how does that impact Oregon State's offense?
Yeah, I mean it puts the onus on a guy like Freehoff to have to step up and be that possession type receiver for them because they've got depth and they have ability at the position. You think about guys like David Wells and Taz Reddicks and others. But they're mostly smaller guys, fast guys, guys that are going to go deep. And Malik loves the deep ball, but you can't throw it deep every time. So you're going to need guys that are possession receivers like Clemens has the ability to with his size. Um, they're hoping to have Clemens back. He isn't looking like he's going to play in the first game. If it's more severe, then you're asking different questions like who else do you look to as far as different options at the receiver spot in your depth and among young players that beyond Eddie Freehoff, which it's a lot to put on the shoulders of a redshirt freshman who hasn't played many downs. Who are you going to put in those positions?
Darius, man, I feel for him. It's just been one injury after another. It feels like almost his entire collegiate career. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of players on the offense. Do you have any sleeper guys that you think are going to break out?
Yeah, I think that David Wells is a guy at wide receiver that, with everything that has been talked about with Eddie Freehoff balling out during camp, he's someone that has been flying under the radar as a key option for Malik Murphy at receiver. And the freshman running back, like I mentioned before, Corday Glass, he could do some of the similar things that Saladin Allah did last year, his freshman year, in being sort of a surprise contributor, especially if guys get banged up. Running back is not a easy position to play, an often painful one. And they might look to him a few games this season to provide a burst of athleticism. Those are two guys that I think are flying under the radar, given the talent that this team has at the skill positions, but certainly could be contributors this year.
I want to say one thing. Ryan has been able to be at practice and watch these guys play, which is something that Oregon does not let journalists do. So he has so much institutional knowledge when it comes to this. So when I pick my sleeper player, it's kind of just off of me watching media availabilities and things like that. But my guy, you mentioned him, I think it's Saladin Nala. I'm excited to see his second season. I saw that during the first scrimmage, his position coach, Ray Pickering, went to him and said, I need you to live up to who you are. I need you to be better. And he went into that scrimmage and broke off a 75-yard touchdown run. So I love that he heard his coach and he took that to heart and he did something about it. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see year two for him and if he can kind of flourish a little bit more because I think he's someone that if you're deep in the weeds in Oregon State football, Saladin Allah, but I don't think the more casual fan necessarily knows who he is. So I'm excited to see him backing up Hank this year and him and Hank having that 1-2 punch that Hank and Jam Griffin had last year before Jam unfortunately went down. All right, we are going to head to break and then come back and we're going to talk all things defense. And we're also going to make some predictions about this team. So we will see you on the other side. Welcome back to KOIN Conversations. I'm Brenna Green, joined by Oregonian, Oregon State. That's a mouthful, by the way. Oregonian, Oregon State beat writer Ryan Clarke. All right, Ryan, we are transitioning to the defensive side of the ball. It was a rough year last year for that side, and not all of it was their fault. I mean, my goodness, it was just like guys dropping like flies on that side of the ball. I mean, in particular, I remember Andy Alfieri, who came in as a tight end. All of a sudden, he's on the defensive side midway through the year because they just don't have enough dudes. So, what do you think the identity of this defense will be this year?
Yeah, obviously they are a lot healthier, and that's number one in terms of building an identity is having the bodies there to compete. Trent Bray is back in the defensive coordinator spot. That is something that is happening by necessity, but is also, I think, a positive development for the Oregon State defense thus far in the fall. And you've seen it in fall camp. They're flying around, they're playing with a speed and intensity that regardless of personnel challenges and injuries that they had last year, this team just looks a lot more motivated than it did last year. So, effort and intensity obviously matter. Who are the guys that you have on defense? I think that they have solidified themselves on the edge in a way that makes them legitimately dangerous in terms of rushing the passer, something that last year they just could not do. They were dead last in the country with 7 sacks all season, which when you play 12 games, 7 sacks is not living up to the standard by any
Not what we
stretch.
want. No.
No, not what you want if you're the Beavers, and something that I do think they're going to improve on significantly. You've got Kai Wallen, a transfer coming in from Nebraska, who's done well, and others at the position who have had strong camps, and there's depth there. The inside linebackers, obviously, we had the latest news of Micaiah Tongue unfortunately having to medically retire from the game after 4 season-ending knee injuries in 5 years, which is just brutal luck for somebody. He came into college as a wide receiver. He played at Georgia, transitioned after a couple of injuries into a linebacker role, and was finally healthy this spring and excited to play. And injury luck being what it is in sports is just such a brutal thing. But at his position, they've retooled. They added a guy in Rajon Davis at inside linebacker, transfer from USC, who is like a lot of the guys on this defense, and that they're betting on potential, and they're betting on a guy who might not have had opportunities elsewhere to get consistent snaps, but has the athletic talent, has the size, has the intelligence to play the position. The real strength to me, though, of this Oregon State defense is their secondary. You think about the safety spots with Skylar Thomas, Jaheim Patterson, Tyrese Ivey at the nickel, somebody that has had a really strong fall camp, and guys that are young, but I think talented and ready to prove themselves at corner. So, top to bottom, you look at the Oregon State defense on paper, it's certainly improved. And beyond the statistics and the ages and the experience, these are guys that look motivated and are flying around. And for Malik Murphy trying to adjust to the offense, he's kind of having a tough time sometimes because of that, because of the effort and intensity from this defense.
On the defensive side of the ball, the very clear leader of this defense is Skylar Thomas. I mean, the guy is well known at this point around Oregon State, especially if you're a fan of this team. Skylar, though, he's a little bit on the quieter side. So I was wondering what you've seen from him leadership wise this fall camp.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen an elevated level of communication and leadership out of the veteran guys on this defense, and Skylar is one of them. He's still obviously, he is who he is. He's not going to be the most vocal guy on the team, but he is certainly letting the big hits and the big plays do the talking. He could be a guy that's one of the first safeties taken off the board in the NFL draft next year if he continues on the trajectory that he's on. And that skill, that intelligence, that ability to read offenses and communicate with his teammates in that way is going to be crucial for this Oregon State defense on the back end, especially. If they've got an issue potentially defending in the run game, which popped up plenty of times last year, that's a guy that can be your safety blanket and maybe save you from a big play that breaks off for 75 yards. But I don't think he's going to have nearly as much of that type of responsibility this year because of the improved depth and just overall improvement of the defense. But certainly his leadership is going to be vital for this group.
We talked about a big transfer on the offensive side of the ball. The most renowned transfer on the defensive side would be Nebraska linebacker transfer Kai Wallen. Is he worth the hype? What has that been like?
Yeah, he's had a really good camp. I mean, he provides a level of size and athleticism on the edge that, when you combine him with Nico Taylor, who's also done well, a guy that's coming back for the Beavers, that's formidable. And those are guys that aren't just big, tall, strong, and fast. They understand the game. They're quick with their hands. They have interesting personalities and are able to motivate their teammates and build chemistry with them in unique ways. Especially Kai. He is a avid fisherman, so he's been out in the community, getting on the river, as often as possible. He goes with a bunch of different guys, but Walker Harris, a fellow transfer to the Beavers, is his main fishing buddy, and so they've kind of had this back and forth. Walker thinks that he's caught more fish on the hole than Kai has, but as any great fisherman would tell you, that it's not about how many you catch, it's about who you share the moments with, and it seems like he's sharing a lot of a lot of those moments on in fishing with teammates, and they're not going every weekend, but it is certainly one of the foundational pieces of the chemistry on the defense that is evident.
I love that little back and forth between the two of them at camp the other day where Walker was like, just so you know, I catch the most fish and I want the record to show that. My dad used to say, I don't go fishing, I go catching, and therefore I don't go fishing. So there you go. He does not subscribe to the it's about the time you spend with people in terms of fishing. You mentioned two players already that I wanted to talk about. Those two players are Nico Taylor and Tyrese Ivey. They are both back because of this JUCO rule, this ruling in court, where basically all JUCO players, the NCAA just decided we're just going to give you an extra year to go play, and so both of them came back. Just how have you seen them utilizing that extra year?
I think it's massive for programs like Oregon State to be able to have guys come back that have been in your program for a long time, that you've developed, that are frankly older than most guys in college football and have their bodies more developed. And, Nico and Tyrese are both going to be starters for this defense and are going to be key players that could win you games if they play well. Tyrese has done well primarily at the nickel spot, and somebody that is going to fit very well into what Trent Bray's idea of a defense is. He's fast, he's smart, he hits hard. And Nico Taylor, combining with Kai on the edges, you know, big, strong, athletic guy with experience. That matters, having somebody like that, especially at a crucial position like edge, where you're going to be playing quarterbacks throughout the season that you're going to want to get after, whether it's in the bigger games like Texas Tech and Oregon, or in games like the opener where you're facing a true freshman quarterback to start out against Cal. You're going to want to get after him, and a guy like Nico is experienced enough and savvy enough to do that.
Okay. It's our sleeper players time. Who do you have pegged as a player people aren't talking about that you think is going to have a big impact this year on the defensive side?
Yeah, I think that Trey Glasper is a guy that people should definitely keep an eye out for at defensive back. True freshman, somebody that has a lot of talent and has gotten a lot of reps with the ones so far in the fall. Where he ends up in the depth chart is sort of undetermined at this point. But you look at what happened last year in terms of the contribution and the development into one of the top CBs for Exodus Ayers, who's a sophomore on the team this year. It could be a similar type of trajectory for a guy like Glasper, because this DB room, there's going to be questions about health all year. DBs get banged up. It's just part of the deal. They're slighter guys that are in more precarious positions than others. And Glasper is one that I would be on the lookout for. And even though he is a transfer, even though folks are talking about him, I do still think that Rajon Davis has flown under the radar, and I think the inside linebackers generally have flown under the radar. But Trent Bray is excited about them. He said that it's probably one of the best units he's had since he's been at Oregon State at the inside linebacker position, and he's had some talent there before. So, for him to say that, despite the depth challenges that they now have with the loss of Micaiah Tongue, is, I think, a good sign.
All right. My sleeper, I'm going Jaheim Patterson. Don't think people have been talking about him really. I didn't know who he was before going to fall camp. And the other day, he revealed to the media that he's had 3 picks so far in camp. And also, Trent Bray praised him after their last scrimmage, saying that he had a big tackle in the red zone that really stopped a drive. So I'm going to go with him. He's a 6'5" safety, which is unheard of. I don't even know. I'm curious from your perspective, like, how does that height impact him playing? Like,
Yeah, I mean he's as fast as many of the guys that are much shorter than him at his position, right? But his range in terms of the length of his arms and his ability to get to the ball, it's a big reason why he's gotten the picks that he was talking about. And yeah, he's picked a few off this year and made Malik Murphy and Jabari Johnson's life a little bit miserable sometimes. But that's camp. You're gonna fail. It's
yeah.
not going to be fun sometimes. It's been fun for him though, for a lot of different moments, and certainly somebody that with that length and size is going to shrink the windows in the secondary for opposing quarterbacks. He's not a big slow guy by any stretch. He's got the speed to combine with it, and I think that range is what sets a guy like that apart.
All right, let's go big picture. What's your pick for their record this year?
I'm gonna go on the more optimistic side because I look at the schedule and I think about where Oregon State has backfilled at different positions. And my belief is if this Oregon State team stays healthy, that they go 9-3 this year. And that's a major improvement over last year for a team that was 5-7, that lost six of its final seven games. And in a story that I wrote earlier this week, I talked about the best case scenario being probably 10-2. That's obviously one game off that. I think that where the different programs are at that Oregon State plays, with the exception of those two road games at Texas Tech and Oregon, which I think are major uphill battles, you could argue every game this year is winnable for the Beavers on this independent schedule, playing teams that are, in the bottom 25 of ESPN's FPI along the way, along with an FCS team, seven home games, road trips that, yes, you have to go far to Tulsa and to Appalachian State, but those are two programs that, with your investment in NIL, bringing in a guy like Malik Murphy, having a more balanced offense, having a healthier and more robust defense that flies around, this is a team capable of winning 8 or 9 games. I would hover between 8-4 and 9-3 for my official prediction, but I'm at this point just because of proximity and because of that sort of bias that comes with being around a group every
Mm-hmm.
day. I would say that 9 wins is certainly attainable.
So we agree. That's where I had them at too. 9-3, dropping that Texas Tech game, dropping that Oregon game, and maybe one random game in there where it's like, they probably shouldn't have lost that one. So
Yeah, I can
I
see that game in Pullman in late November certainly being that third game because that weather, as you well know, will be rather
ooh.
dicey.
Worst game I've ever covered was Apple Cup 2018 in Pullman. I do not. Oh God, it was awful. It's awful. So yeah, enjoy that one, Oregon State. I'm good with not having to be in that weather ever again. Anyways,
Yeah.
Ryan, thank you so much for your time. We so appreciate it. And that's it for Coin Conversations. Thank you guys so much for joining us.